News reporter Rowena Price is entering the United States Senate under a visitor card that shows her identity as being Caroline Eldridge from Family First, suggesting that she is not foreign to using different names to get to the bottom of a story. Her card is approved. She knocks on the door of the office of Senator Stephen R. Sachs, who surprises Rowena by opening the door himself. Since Stephen was expecting a Caroline Eldridge already, he comments that she's early but invites her inside. She shows Stephen a bunch of pictures on her laptop and asks him to provide a caption for the individual pictures, which will be used in a Family First brochure. However, she moves to a group of suggestive pictures of Stephen with his former intern Josh, proposing that the two were having an extramarital affair. Suddenly, Stephen becomes serious and asks who she really is. Rowena exposes Stephen's hypocrisy in that he has been actively lobbying against gay rights while having gay relations with his intern. Even his Family First campaign, one that advocates for heterosexual conservative nuclear families, is an expression of his hypocrisy. When Stephen tries to deny it, Rowena reveals that she has a signed statement from Josh, who is ready to turn over the love letters. She finally reveals that she works for David Shane at the New York Courier and will run the story tomorrow. Furthermore, Josh has also revealed that he wasn't the only male intern with whom Stephen had an affair. Desperate, Stephen says he will give Rowena anything she wants to stop the story, but this is exactly what the New York Courier wanted from him, as their conversation is being monitored through the laptop's mic. With the evidence in hand, Rowena leaves for her office. It is revealed that Rowena herself is working under the pen name David Shane, and she shares her story with her editor, Arvis Naran, to publish. Rowena celebrates at a local club with her researcher, Miles Haley. However, Arvis appears to tell her that the story is shut down since Josh has pulled out, and any communication with him goes through Josh's lawyer. Rowena becomes furious since she's been working on this story for 6 months, but Arvis tells her to take a leave since that is the wish of Kolsky, the newspaper's owner. Rowena accuses Arvis of supporting Stephen since the New York Courier endorsed Stephen's last campaign. She shares her frustration with Miles, but Arvis reminds the two of them that the story is dead because their source ran out and not because of some campaign against them. Rowena decides to quit the paper and leaves. She tries to hail a taxi, but it doesn't stop. Furious, she starts walking towards the subway station while a girl chases her and calls her name. However, Rowena is late for the train too, as it leaves just as she's about to enter. The girl chasing her finally catches up to her, revealed to be her childhood friend, Grace Clayton. When the two meet, Grace reveals she already knows Rowena is working on the sex scandal involving Stephen, but hasn't talked to anyone about it. She offers her a better story to cover. Grace wants her help in taking down wealthy advertising executive Harrison Hill. Grace tells Rowena that she talked to Harrison online, and the two struck a friendship until Harrison developed a liking for Grace. Eventually, Grace decided to move to New York and met Harrison at his public fundraiser. Harrison was surprised by her audacity, and the two then went to a motel that Harrison is keeping for affairs. Afterward, Harrison stopped communicating with Grace entirely. Grace knows, however, where Harrison lives and has seen his wife. She wants Rowena to use her David Shane alias to publish the emails he sent to Grace. Though Rowena clearly wants to avoid her, Grace gives Rowena the file containing the emails to read just as she enters the train. Rowena decides to investigate Harrison. The following morning, she comes home to hear a voicemail from Miles offering Rowena a new job. The second voicemail is from Elizabeth Clayton, Grace's mother, who needs her help. Rowena immediately picks up the phone, and Elizabeth is worried since she cannot reach Grace and has already filed a missing persons report. But Rowena assures her she saw Grace last night. When Elizabeth mentions a drowned woman who was recovered last night, Rowena agrees to go to the morgue to confirm if it's Grace. When the body is revealed to Rowena, the person is revealed to have been drowned, and it is in terrible condition. Rowena feels nauseous and rushes to vomit. Her childhood memories with Grace flash before her eyes now that she recognizes the body as Grace. Elizabeth is called to New York and interviewed by the NYPD. Elizabeth and Rowena corroborate that Grace had been having fights with her boyfriend, Chuck Freeman. When the officer left, Elizabeth told Rowena that Grace was immensely proud of Rowena's articles and kept them with her. When Rowena asks how Grace recognized her as David Shane, Elizabeth says she assumed Rowena told her. Though she does not mention it to the police, Rowena suspects Hill's involvement in the crime. When she walks out of the interview, Miles is waiting for her. Together, they return to Rowena's apartment, and Rowena asks Miles when the last time he met Grace was, but Miles cannot remember. However, Rowena knows that Miles has been talking to Grace. Miles says he only exchanged a couple of emails as friends. Rowena realizes Miles was the one who told Grace about her being David Shane and Rowena covering Senator Stevens' scandal. This infuriates Rowena since she cut off all connections with Grace after she had an affair with Rowena's boyfriend, Cameron. Miles apologizes for his shortcomings and asks if the police have any leads on Grace's murder. Rowena says that while the police are chasing Chuck, she intends to chase Harrison Hill and shows Miles the emails. Though Miles is entertained by the emails, he tells Rowena that this cannot be a story since Hill is a very powerful man. Rowena insists that the case has all the right ingredients for a potential murder. Later, Miles tells Rowena that he has hacked into Grace's account and has seen the emails she shared with Hill, but Hill was talking under the name Adex, which means that their evidence is not yet conclusive. At night, Miles comes over to show Rowena Grace's email, the latest of which includes a threat from Grace against Hill just a few days prior to her death. Miles reveals he can confirm that Adex is Hill by making him email them and hacking into his account. This excites Rowena, who thanks him for his initiative and comforts Miles's doubts by saying she will take this story straight to the police. She then goes for her date, leaving a despondent Miles back home, who watches with a sad face when Rowena brings her date back to her apartment. The following morning, Rowena follows Hill and asks Miles for his help, but Miles mentions how Rowena started seeing Cameron again right after Grace died. This infuriates Rowena, who accuses him of spying on her. When Rowena threatens to ask for someone else's help, Miles becomes pacified and offers to help. Miles sets her up undercover as a temporary worker at Harrison's advertising company, H2A, as Catherine Pogue. This job allows Rowena direct access to Hill at his office. Meanwhile, Miles briefs her on Hill's past, how Hill is rich because of his wife Mia's wealth. While at work, Rowena overhears Hill talking to John Kirschenbaum, a representative of Reebok, who complains to Hill that some of Hill's executives are investigating John's Reebok account and tells him to stay out of it, as he's been working with Reebok for 10 years. However, Hill says John's time is ending, and someone has to pick up the account in John's stead. Hill asks his secretary, Esmeralda, to gather evidence against John. While in the elevator, Rowena finds Hill leaving with a colleague with whom she sees Hill having a private affair. The following morning, Esmeralda tells Rowena to set up gift bags for a Victoria's Secret collection launch. Miles calls her at work to inform her that Grace was poisoned and that she was pregnant. Rowena meets fellow advertiser Gina, who reveals that Hill is rich because of his wife Mia, and if she left him, he would be penniless, causing him to be more secretive about his affairs. While Rowena is packing the gift bags alone at night, Hill surprises her and reveals he's been watching her. He tells her he's excited to see her at the party. At the party, Rowena stands with Gina while distributing the gift bags, and Gina informs Rowena about all the major company employees. She believes Mia is infertile, which is why Hill and Gina routinely visit fertility clinics. Rowena notices how one of the company's employees, Bethany, is desperate for Hill's attention until Josie, Hill's frontwoman for his affairs, takes her away to remind her that she is embarrassing Hill, as his wife is at the party. She gives her cab fare and tells her to go home. The following day, Arvis chases Rowena to a restaurant and tells her to return to the paper. But Rowena is still angry at him for silencing his story. Arvis reminds her that powerful people silencing journalists is a reality they have to accept, but she can always chase after another powerful person as a journalist. Miles sets up an email account for Rowena to use and adds Adex as a friend. Rowena tells Miles that Hill has squashed a lot of lawsuits about extramarital affairs and tells him to chase the money trail to prepare a case against him. Rowena discusses her theory with Miles that Hill may have taken Grace out after she got pregnant because his own wife is infertile. Miles still doubts that Hill is responsible for it, and the two make a bet. Miles tells Rowena to practice flirting online, as she's not accustomed to chatting. At night, Rowena spends hours chatting with people on her account until Miles himself messages her. He tells her he used her account to message Hill's Adex account, promising to flirt with him. When Rowena asks why, Miles insists it is to get into Hill's firewall. He initiates a conversation with Adex and leaves the rest to Rowena. When Rowena's conversation with Adex becomes too intense, she tries to pull out, but Miles uses her account to send messages on her behalf, keeping her locked in. She calls Miles to tell him not to interfere with her work again. The following day, Rowena opens her account at work and instantly gets a message from Adex, though she notices Hill in a meeting. Esmeralda intervenes and tells Rowena to fill out her I-9 form. During the conversation, she asks if she's worked for Kirschenbaum. Rowena unconsciously agrees she's worked for him, though briefly, while also mentioning her other past employers. Meanwhile, Hill leaves his meeting to enter another office where Kenneth Phelps is waiting for him and proceeds to assault him while accusing him of spying on him for Kirschenbaum, firing him. After the incident, she resumes her chat with Hill on AOL, and Hill appears pacified, even excited after the day's stunt. He asks Rowena for a picture, and she calls Miles for help finding a photograph of a previous intern at H2A named Veronica. Miles manages to hack into H2A's database to retrieve a photo. However, just as Rowena is about to send the picture, her computer freezes, with Veronica's picture on the screen, and Hill walks over to talk with Rowena. She tries to turn off the computer's power while Hill tries to ask her out on a date. Rowena apologizes, refuses his offer, and turns off the computer before he can see. However, just as Hill leaves, Rowena calls him out to tell him she can change her mind later. Rowena and Miles meet Bill Patel, who tells the two that Grace was poisoned with belladonna, a highly toxic plant sometimes used in eye surgeries to dilate the pupils. It was placed in her eyes in toxic amounts. Rowena leaves the two to go on a date with Hill. There, she mentions how Hill is married, but Hill says he's only having a casual drink with her. When Hill asks Rowena's status, she reveals she's looking for online dating options. When he leans in to kiss her, Rowena raises her glass and mentions the incident with Phelps. Hill says he committed the sin of betraying his friends. Realizing that Rowena is not interested in physical intimacy, he decides to call a cab to help her return home. When she returns home, Miles calls her to inform her that the police are linking Grace's murder with another serial killer, who performed executions similarly and was covered by Rowena's newspaper. When she ends the call, she gets a text from Adex, who is flirting with her again. Rowena convinces the Adex account to mention H2A and confirm that he's Hill. While she's flirting with him, Rowena takes the screenshots of the conversation and sends them to Miles. However, unbeknownst to her, the online Hill is actually Miles, who is secretly obsessed with her. The following morning, Cameron comes to visit Rowena. While they're kissing, she gets a call from Miles, which she reluctantly takes. Miles informs her that he made a breakthrough in Hill's case, but realizing that Cameron is in the house, he invites her to a restaurant to discuss it. However, he also mentions that Cameron is having a DNA test later for Grace's child, since the police saw them together in November. She confronts him about his lies, and though Cameron insists he loves her, he doesn't deny that Grace's child could have been his. Rowena kicks him out. Hill waits outside to drive her to work when she leaves her building. When she enters her car, it is revealed that Mia is spying on Hill, to whom Esmeralda had told that Hill was in a meeting. At the office, Hill is celebrating getting the Reebok account. Finding the time, she goes to meet Miles, who tells her that Hill's fortune was invested heavily in medical research, and one research revolutionized surgery by finding the medicinal use of belladonna, which links Hill to the murder. He also says he cannot get into Hill's firewall and offers her a spyware USB to inject into Hill's laptop to hack into it, which will take around 3 minutes. Finding the office empty, she injects the USB, which is blocked by the computer's spyware. She calls Miles, who says he did not expect this, and apologizes for the mishap. However, Hill catches Rowena snooping, thinks she is a corporate spy, and fires her. Rowena insists, however, that she only came to leave a note mentioning she had a crush on Hill and wanted to go on dates with him to a list of restaurants. Though Hill finds this explanation absurd, Rowena leaves the list with him, and Hill offers to take her out anyway. When Hill kisses Rowena on their date, she excuses herself to go to the bathroom. Behind her, her phone rings. Hill opens it, revealing a text from Miles promising to get into Hill's computer. He doesn't mention it and takes her to his car. Rowena says he should drop her home, as she's not feeling well, but Hill silently drives the car into a silent road and asks her to tell him her real name. Rowena insists that her name is Catherine. Hill tells her that Esmeralda had already told her she was a spy for Kirschenbaum, but he didn't believe her. When he asks again whether she's a spy, Rowena agrees that she is. Hill accuses her of not being loyal, but Rowena replies that he's not loyal to his wife either, which makes Hill furious. However, he stops himself from hurting her and drops her home safely. Rowena returns home to take a shower, but she has a traumatic flashback of her abusive father, replaced with Hill. The following morning, Miles calls to check on her, but Rowena says Hill's case is over since he saw Miles's text messages and that she will meet her mother in the rehab. Miles is shocked by this and decides that they should make up a story with what they have. As Rowena meets her mother, Miles pretends to be an IT manager here to check Hill's computer after his antivirus flashed a warning about the spyware. Hill tells Josie to show Miles around the place. Rowena reaches Miles's apartment, but he's not at home. Josie shows Miles a presentation at H2A inside the human eye, which makes him suspicious. Tired of waiting for him, Rowena decides to enter Miles's apartment using his keys, which he keeps at the top of his door. Once inside, Rowena hears a voice saying, "Miles is sexy," in her voice. She follows it into the bathroom and sees an additional door. Behind the door, Rowena discovers a shrine to her and explicit pictures of Miles and Grace. She also discovers that Miles is behind the ADEX account. In Miles's computer are pictures of Miles having a steamy session with Grace. Miles finds Rowena in his room and tries to pass it off as a joke, but Rowena is furious with him. She tells him to admit that he was ADEX and that he was trying to set up Hill. Miles says he only pretended to be ADEX a few times and that he's found evidence that Hill had access to belladonna for poisoning. Rowena goes to the police station and they lead ADEX to a hotel room together. There, Hill is arrested for the murder of Grace. During the case, the poison is found in Hill's car, as well as Grace's blood, hair, and bodily secretions. Hill is convicted guilty of murder, and Rowena writes her story. However, it is revealed that Rowena has access to belladonna. She has another traumatic flashback of her mother killing her abusive father to protect Rowena from him. Miles visits Rowena and reveals that he knows she is the real killer. She used the investigation to frame Hill. A younger Grace watches from her window as they bury the body. Grace has been blackmailing Rowena with this information ever since. Miles goes on to describe how Rowena had plotted the murder to end Grace's blackmail and pin the crime on Hill. When Grace mentions Hill to Rowena and tries to blackmail her into investigating him, she takes a virtual tour of his office, discovers his link to belladonna, and decides to use it to frame Hill for Grace's murder. When she went out on dates with Hill, she planted the evidence in his car. When Miles asks how she intends to keep him quiet, blackmailing her to have an affair with him, she stabs him to death, ransacks the kitchen, and plants the belladonna in his hands. She then wounds her neck with his hand. Rowena then calls the police, claiming to have been attacked by Miles and that he might have been the real murderer. As she waits for the police, a man looks out of a neighboring window, having witnessed the events and the movie ends.